So 15 to 30 inches of additional snowfall in the northern mountains, 24 to 36 inches in addition to the 23 that's been reported in Alta so far. So the cottonwoods are getting just hammered.
Another incredible sight to see this morning. This herd of 60 elk dotted the hillside near I-80 and South Foothills Drive. Fox 13 News reporter Lucy Nelson witnessed the chaos as crews tried to push them safely back up into Parley's Canyon. Our biologists think just because there's been such a heavy snowpack this year, it's just so hard for them to find feed in some of those higher elevation areas and even in the foothills where they're used to finding feed, during the winter months. So they're coming way further down into the valleys. After a 3-hour effort, crews were able to push the herd by foot, car, and snowmobile up into Parley's Canyon. Jolly says miraculously, without any of the animals or drivers along I-80 injured.
There have been so many recent collisions with elk near Echo Junction in Summit County that just today UDOT reduced speed limits in this area. News Specialist Andrew Adams spoke to drivers and troopers alike, also warning about this hazard.
Well, just over this berm, it's a steep drop down to Echo Reservoir, where earlier tonight we saw with our own eyes a massive herd of elk going over the ice. And just over here, it's I-80. You see those headlights coming over the hill there. It's become an unfortunate crossing for winter migration.
The elk have been running amok. Obviously, they're looking for food and they're hungry, making their way down from the mountains, crossing I-80 and I-84.
It's a lot bigger problem than we've ever had in the past.
Troopers say they alone have responded to 30 crashes.
Everything from commercial vehicles to small passenger cars up there in the last 2 weeks.
UDOT believes the total number of elk strikes has been even higher, as many as 35 since Friday. Crews have now reduced the speed limit to 60 here, while installing signs warning of the danger.
It's very hard to see the sides of the road at night, so a reduced speed would definitely help.
The elk have a way of bringing their own traffic to this junction.
It's definitely a magnificent sight.
The drivers know their presence as they forage for food, is leaving everyone on thin ice.
Several elk died in collisions this morning with cars.
This was the scene near the top of Parley's Way this morning as the elk made their next move.
They're giant 700-pound animals that if they end up in front of you on the road and you end up hitting them, it could be catastrophic.
Much more dangerous than hitting a deer, which would be about half the weight.
We've had all types of different situations in my 32 years of elk, kind of being in troublesome spots. This one's probably the most dangerous.
They believe most of the elk settled down in the golf course at the Salt Lake Country Club for the day.
The Little Cottonwood Canyon ski area, which already has a reputation for being one of the snowiest resorts in North America, with an average of more than 500 inches a year, got 9 inches of snow between Tuesday and Wednesday to give it 445 inches for the season. Its previous high was 442 inches in 1981-1982. The Utah DWR implemented an emergency statewide closure for shed hunting in Utah to protect wintering big game. The antler gathering restrictions are effective February 7th through April 30th, 2023, across Utah, including both public and private lands. The DWR also implemented emergency deer feeding in parts of Rich, Summit, and Cache counties as additional efforts to help wintering big game. The DWR will continue to monitor the condition of the deer and the winter conditions across the state and may lift the closures earlier than April 30th if conditions allow. What's up, guys? Welcome to my portion of the vlog. This week, Brayden and I, we are heading to R&K, where I used to guide. We're going to help feed some deer. This is something that they do on some really tough winters. Daniel, the owner of R&K, pays for feed out of his own pocket to take care of the deer herd. So we're heading there this morning, and we want to bring you guys along. So come along and let's check it out. Hopefully be in a truck. Alright guys, just getting out here and got the truck all loaded up. Want to introduce you to Travis. This is Travis. He's Daniel's right-hand man, I'd say.
Main hay feeder.
Main hay feeder. So we're just getting here. Travis already did all the hard work, got all the hay loaded up, so we're heading out. Let's roll.
And then on the way back through, piles of deer on the hay.
We just marked one of the feeding stations off the checklist. We have 12 on this section of the ranch. How much are we feeding today?
2,850 pounds of hay and 50 gallons of pellets.
Dang. So
on this side of the ranch.
On this side of the ranch, that's what we're feeding today. So we're just hitting each one of these stations, and we spread it out to try and spread the deer numbers out so they're not all concentrated in one spot. Another one down. So Travis here, he used to be my boss back when I was guiding for these guys, but he does this every morning, 7 a.m. or earlier, because Travis is a workhorse, but he does this every single day. So this is something we wanted to kind of touch on in this video, is just the fact that I don't even know how to explain it, but it's hard to imagine how much time and money some of these private landowners or outfitter like R&K puts into taking care of these deer and elk in the winter. And it's kind of hard to see that from an outside perspective because it's private property. Nobody's up here in the winter necessarily to see what's going on behind the scenes, but that's kind of what I wanted to highlight in today's video, is people like the people here at R&K taking money out of their own pockets and time out of their days and their lives to come and feed and take care of these deer and elk. So it's pretty special when people who you think, I don't even know how to phrase it, I guess, Travis, but it's, you think of a big outfit, something like R&K, and you think that they just, I guess, are in it to kill animals, make money type of thing. But this is the side of an outfitter like R&K that you would never see, and you never see behind the scenes, or the coyote patrol that they do, or the work on the mountain lions that they've done. So it's just things like this that you never see behind the scenes, and I hope you guys can appreciate the time and effort and money that goes into this, and that's kind of what I'm highlighting this week on my section of this video. So look at all these deer. They hear the food truck coming through.
The reason that we try to get up in the mornings and feed before the sun comes up or right as the sun comes up is to create a stress-free environment for these animals so that they can feed during the day and not be bothered. So we try to feed before the sun comes up just to allow them time to not be bothered, but to have feed necessary to help them get through their lives. And we also plow miles and miles of road to help them get around in the winter too, not just from feeding stations, but from other areas of the ranch to food sources.
Stop number 4, and it's crazy to see these deer just rely on this stuff. Yeah.
This benefits everyone.
Oh,
From
yeah.
landowners to public hunters.
That's the point I was going to make.
And especially public hunters, because we'll keep them healthy. They're going to bounce off us and roam other places.
Yeah.
But this is an effort for wildlife conservation. It's not for outfitter conservation.
Yeah, like this is a main winter range for a huge herd of mule deer, and you're spending your own money and time to feed deer that are eventually going to end up on public or other private ranches.
So it's not a selfish endeavor for us to do this. It's a wildlife endeavor.
That is stop number 12. So that is Travis's daily routine, helping the deer and elk up here in this part of Utah. Pretty dang crazy to see, I don't know, just the sheer number of deer and elk and even turkeys that rely on this stuff. Pretty crazy. So we're gonna go meet up with Daniel, the owner of R&K, and we're gonna check out another portion of the ranch and kind of compare and contrast the different parts of the ranches and kind of the different effects winter has had on those parts of the ranch. So we're gonna go check those places out, but huge shout out to Travis for letting us tag along on his daily chores. And yeah guys, just nothing but respect for the people here at R&K and everything they do for these deer and elk up here that public land hunters get to enjoy, and any neighboring ranches around here. So I know that deer and elk appreciate them, and a fellow sportsman and hunter like me really appreciates the efforts these guys put into this stuff. Alrighty guys, we just met up with Daniel. He's an owner of R&K. This is Daniel here.
Hey.
And we're gonna go feed some elk and some deer, right?
Elk and deer both, yeah.
So you guys feed, Cheeto was saying, 2,800 pounds of alfalfa and 50 gallons of pellets a day?
Yeah.
For how long each winter?
Well, we start in November, because that's the biggest thing with feeding is you have to, you know, everybody always says you feed alfalfa to deer, you're gonna kill them. Well, you will if you start in February when they're already on a hard winter and they're already so far down on their fat reserves, you will kill them. You know, the rumen in their stomach, they can't process it. It'll give them the scours and you can kill more than you can save. But you start them on it early, free choice, let them come to it when they want it, leave when they want to leave. I mean, I've been doing it for over 20 years. And we do a mixture, alfalfa and pellet both, but you know, we'll do it November, December, January, February, March. By the end of March, they're wanting to leave. I mean, because they'd rather eat their own natural stuff, right, than a bale of hay.
Yeah.
So, you know, once they can get up, if the snow's so deep they can't eat the bitter brush and snowberry bush and sage in their winter range, then by the end of March, they can get to where they need to go. And so they start leaving, and then, you know, I don't pull that feed away from them until they pretty much all dispersed. Then we go back to every site, clean the whole site up, gather everything up, gather any strings that may have been left behind. We reseed it and leave it, and then pick a different site for the following year. You know, even if it's only 200 or 300 yards away, we reseed where we fed and then clean it up and go again.
On average, how much do you think you're paying per day to feed the deer and elk? You had to guess.
Well, I mean, on a light year, just feed alone is over $500 a day in feed.
Dang. November till March, basically?
Yeah, November, December, January, February, 5 months a year. So, you know, 500 a day. And right now we're at 800 a day. That doesn't count the time it takes to run a backhoe up here and open the road with chains on it. That doesn't count, you know, 4 to 6 hours a day with man hours doing it to keep them alive. So it's, you know, well over 100,000, 150,000 a year probably to keep the deer and elk alive. And it's mainly for the, like, we don't really want to feed the elk if we don't have to, because I mean the elk can withstand twice as hard of a winter as the deer can. So, you know, we'll use some grass hay to keep the elk away from our alfalfa, because they digest totally different. You know, an elk is like a beef cow, a deer is like a sheep. Okay. So a deer will eat you know, and something that grows one time a year. You know, an elk comes in and grazes on grass, and then we get a rainstorm and it gets fresh grass, so that's even better than the grass that was there to begin with. So an elk is like cows and horses. They eat the grasses, but not the deer. Deer are like a sheep. So where we're going now, we normally don't feed over here, but there's been about 150 head of elk below Echo Reservoir that are getting hit on the road and are a real safety issue. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in vehicle damage, and even more so than that. Yeah, look at them already down here. More so than that, we could have someone, get injured or potentially killed. So what we're doing now is feeding on Echo Reservoir below the reservoir and bringing them up. And it's about a 2-mile trek. We have to move them. And then I've opened up a canyon down here on the winter range where we'll feed them, on our time and our dollar. The division has kicked in with some hay for the elk, but pull them off of the dam where they shouldn't be and get them up on the hill where they should be. So you can see in front of us how many elk have already started to use this. And this is the middle of the day. We're 1 o'clock. So
yeah, there's some up there bedded.
I mean, I just left the reservoir. There's normally 150 head down there, and I could only count 25. So I think we've moved over 100 head of elk already in 3 or 4 days of just trailing them up the road to get them where they need to go. And once they get here, they're not going to have to leave because this is going to be the only place we'll feed them.
You said the division finally kicked in some hay to kind of help with this, but it's still taking you or somebody like Travis, hours every single day out of your day to come and do this.
Yeah, and there's multiple people around. I know they're doing it in Cache Valley. There's a lot of guys that are willing to go help the wildlife if they can get some assistance, in feed, because it's not cheap to feed these animals. So, but yeah, it's, about 6 hours of my day goes to feeding wildlife that a lot of these elk that have collars on them will go from Echo Reservoir all the way up the Chalk Creek drainage over the state line into Wyoming. Some of them will go towards Hardware Ranch. Some of them will go above Camas. They'll go south 50 miles. So it's not, I'm an outfitter. I do it for a living. I obviously, my best interest is to keep a healthy elk and deer population. But at the same time, so many of these animals get dispersed on so many other units that it's benefiting everybody in the state. And that's what I'd like to see collectively, is people see what we need to do on these wintering ranges. And on a mild winter when we don't have to, then don't, because they'll make it through and they'll be fine. But we have the tools and the knowledge now, whether it's when we capture a deer and put a collar on it and then help with the DWR. They pull blood samples, they do ultrasound and do a brisket fat, rump fat. They age them, they do stool sample, they do everything they can possibly get to gather data on these deer when they collar them, deer and elk both. And they can tell you in December whether that deer is going to ultimately live or whether it's doesn't have enough fat reserves on its body to make it through an average northern Utah winter. So if it's below X percent, and I might be wrong a percent or two, but say it's below 11% brisket fat, then that deer will not make it through the winter. Like, even though it looks great in December, come February and March, it'll be dead. Yeah. And you'll see as we go down through here, you'll see deer that are just laying under a tree, curled up and dead.
Yeah, this is kind of the contrast I wanted to show between a place like this that you just started feeding versus a place that you started in November because you knew it was going to be a hard winter. There were signs of that. And those deer over there, we maybe saw 2 or 3 dead deer, and those are likely to be lion or coyote kills.
Sure.
Versus, we didn't see a single deer over on that canyon that was laid up, couldn't move. It was ridiculous how many deer we saw, and they were all healthy, fat, running around, playing. Versus, I can see a couple deer laying under trees right here, not getting up.
They won't even get up and move when we drive by them. And this is the lowest you can get on the winter range. This is as low as we get. We're at 5,000 feet. They can't go any lower. We're at Echo Reservoir. We're as low as we can get for the winter range, for the, Unit 6 or Unit 4, the deer herd on the winter range. This is south-facing slope, not a tremendous amount of snow, but no feed, and below freezing, well below negative degrees for multiple days in a row, which is harder on them than the depth of the snow. And so there's a lot of things that go into the deer being healthy and being able to make it through the year. And even if it's not a winter, if it's a drought, like back in 2018, we had a terrible drought. So they went into the winter with below 8 or 9% brisket and rump fat, and followed by a hard winter. Well, that's just you're already set up to lose. And we lost 70+% of our entire population in the Chalk Creek drainage in 1 year due to a drought followed by a winter. So then what you need to do, in my mind, and what the division's been great to work with us on, is control the controllables, which are predators. If there's a lion track on my ground and you're going to put me in a draw unit and hold me to 6 or 7 or 8 tags, when I can go out and kill 50 in 3 months, and each cat is killing 75 to 100 deer per year, and we can get in the air with the helicopter and kill 60 coyotes in a day, and each coyote's killing 20 deer per year per coyote. I mean, just think of, how many deer you saved in the winter working on predators versus feeding. I mean, we didn't even have enough deer in 2019 to feed the number of mountain lions on the landscape. And that's the bottom line. And I'm not for getting rid of any animal, whether it even is a predator, but they dang sure need to be kept in check. And once our deer populations come back up, then we can lay off the predators a little bit. But when they get so far down, if you don't do something about it, then you won't even have them.
Yeah, and that's always an argument for some people who are against predator hunting. But then what happens to the predators? They starve to death, get sick, and they die off, and it's just an imbalance in the ecosystem.
Sure.
That it's like the humans can step in with hunting and predator control and control the ebbs and flows and kind of even everything out, so it's a slow incline versus drastic increases and decreases in both predators and prey.
Yeah, and that's proven time and time again. You will never find more people willing to do conservation than the hunter. Like, my landowners, the people that come out and hunt with me, just your concerned citizen that sees them starving to death against their house in their backyard. I mean, people want to contribute and conserve the wildlife. And, hunters donate more to that cause than anybody does.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. And like the whole purpose of us showing this in like this week's vlog or the video is to see stuff behind the scenes that somebody like Daniel has been doing for 20 years. And he's not doing it for recognition or, like he said, his own monetary gain. Half these animals or more aren't even on his ranch when he can hunt them with his outfitting company. So it's just somebody who truly loves wildlife and knows how fragile something like a mule deer can be. And he's seen it happen over the last 30 years of him guiding and hunting and being part of this habitat, that he knows that there's stuff he can do to step up, whether it's his own time or money, to control and to help these animals, because they're a fragile animal. They really are.
Yeah, they're extremely fragile, and with the building and the loss of quite a bit of the winter range, it's in my own mind, it just makes absolutely zero sense to not control the controllables. If you can control it, which you can, like we talked about the predators, you can on feeding, you can on lions, coyotes, you can on pushing trails for them to get to the winter range. I mean, you can on fencing. We've put in for fencing along the highway corridors. The amount of animals that get killed on the highway is just astronomical. And all of these things added up will preserve our resource and the deer and elk that we all love to go see, whether you like just to look at them, whether you like to hunt them. You're a bow hunter, rifle hunter, muzzleloader hunter. You're a landowner that's trying to preserve your ranch and not develop it, so you need to have the income from the wildlife. And I mean, it's all a full circle deal. Hunters are not just out there, bloodthirsty people to put horns on the wall. Behind the scenes is a much bigger effort than what happens during the season.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I worked for you guys for 4 or 5 seasons, and I never even really fully understood the stuff that happens behind scenes. And I feel like you and I are pretty close friends, and it's crazy to think every single day you're out here doing this. It's just...
Well, it's a way of life for me, so I can see it probably a little more in depth than other people, and that's where I'm glad you guys came along, because of the education side of it. You can show and talk about what happens on the winter range, what happens when we have a drought, what happens when we have a hard winter, what happens when the predators are at an imbalance and out of control, and who's willing to help, who's not willing to help, what do we need to do to change things to bring that back into, a ebb and flow and where it needs to be. And so I'm glad you guys are going to come out and showcase this, but, we're certainly not the only ones doing this. There's a lot of people that do this. This is the first time I think we've ever had anybody even go along with us on our winter feeding deal. But we do it every year. Yeah, this is 22 years now. So
yeah, and to be clear, like, I was the one who reached out to Daniel because I'm sure he has no need to show any of this, but I wanted to reach out and show, because the big controversy right now with the fishing game is the shed closure and the harsh winter, and people are confused on how things are being managed. And I just wanted to show how somebody who has seen multiple droughts and harsh winters and has been more in tune with deer population and elk population than anybody I know, what he has been doing to help the population and what he does year in and year out. So that's the whole purpose of this video. I just wanted to almost give you a spotlight and show off, if you really care about the wildlife and think that, I don't know, a lot of people have misconceptions that outfitters or private ranches are just all greedy people who just care about money. They have no idea what's going on during the winter. Half these elk, I'm sure of it, you've seen color studies, end up in the Uintas where we can hunt them on public tags. And it's just anybody who thinks that a private ranch or a big outfit or anything like that is a bad thing obviously has no idea how much money and effort goes into saving the whole herd entirely. So
yeah, it's all just about education. I mean, there's a great study BYU came out with that shows, leading up to the general season elk hunt. And again, these statistics, don't hold me to the exact percentages, but they're close. Leading up to the general season elk hunt, about 85% of every elk in the state will migrate off of public land and go to private land. And the minute that general season elk hunt is over, within a 3-week period, they go back to the public land. So, the private landowners are harboring and growing and holding these elk, during critical times of the year. And this unit, I won't kill a single elk off of this unit where we're feeding. Haven't done in 25 years of hunting this ranch that we have. But 6 months out of the year, they'll be down here on the winter range. So the landowner, the private landowner, should have some compensation for feeding the entire population for half of the year. Just because they're not here during the hunting season, that's the reason why we have some of these later season hunts, and that people, can frown upon and think that it's unfair. Well, who's taking care of the wildlife for 6 months out of the year? Your lower elevation winter range ranches that they can't come out here in September and hunt an elk because they're not here. They're at 12,000 feet, not at 5,000 feet or at 8,000 feet. They're not down here in the junipers off the freeway and on the Echo Reservoir. But we're the ones taking care of them, meaning collectively a bunch of landowners in the northern Utah. So it's all just about education. People are real quick to form an opinion on something that, if they just took a couple steps back and wanted to learn about it a little bit, it would change their mind. I mean, it certainly changed my mind. I changed my mind on things once I get data given to me by the fishing game or by another outfitter or by a landowner. I mean, I change my opinion on things all the time. That I've been doing it 20 years. It's my field as a professional, and I change my opinion if I'm provided information that is otherwise different than what I was thinking regularly, you know. And if we can't be in that mindset, then it's a lose-lose. Just try to do the best you can with the knowledge you have and be open to what's going on.
That's awesome. Well, should we go feed some animals?
Yeah.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and maybe learn a thing or two. I know I sure did. Huge shout out to Daniel and Travis at R&K for letting me come tag along. This was a way I could give back to the deer and elk herds in my areas by trying to educate some people. Because I personally can't afford to spend $100,000, $150,000 feeding deer and elk through the winter like the people at R&K do. But I know there are many ways that we can help mule deer and elk populations through the winter. One of those ways is Brush for Bucks. We've done this for the last 3 years, and we'll be doing a Brush for Bucks event in Idaho, April 8th. We go and plant sagebrush, so in 3 to 4 years, once that sagebrush is mature, deer and elk have plenty of it on the winter range, which is crucial for their survival. This is a part 1 of a part 2 series. In about a week or two, I've reached out to a local biologist. We're going to be going to a winter range here in Utah. We are going to feed the deer, and I want to pick his brain a little bit about the shed closure, the animal's health in this particular winter, and how that's going to affect this year's hunts. I also am curious on how this is going to affect the herd in the long term on public land. I think it's very, very important as hunters to be educated. So if we ever find ourselves in situations where we're debating with somebody or somebody asks a question, we can have proper answers on what and why we are doing what we are doing. But I hope you guys enjoyed this education style of video. If you did, make sure you leave a like and comment. Make sure to subscribe and come back for part 2 in about a week or two. But until then, see you guys.